I'll be tying my Iwane-E-Dun extended body parachute mayfly. And this was born in the Cheeseman Canyon, which is a South Platte River system. And I was fishing the standard mayfly patterns, and the fish were either taking it or rejecting it, but it almost always seemed like they were backing down. And my drift is, my presentation is as close to perfect as I can get it, because I know if you drag, it doesn't matter what fly you're using, they're not going to take it. So I wanted to make a fly that was very close to the natural. And when I looked at it, I sampled the fly, I took some home and actually put it under a high-powered magnifying glass and noticed that how it differed from the standard pattern. One was I noticed that the actual abdomen was shiny and that the actual tails were just two. And I said, wow, they're using, 4, 5, 6 fibers from a hackle for the tail. And of course, the body or the abdomen was always dubbed. So it didn't have a shine to it. So that's what I was trying to do. So when I was looking around, I needed to find a hook that would allow me to extend the body beyond the shank of the hook. And I wanted to actually have a hook that had a larger gape, because I noticed the smaller, of course, you went with your hooks, which standard would be maybe like a TMC 100 or 101 hook. I noticed as it got smaller, of course, the gape got smaller and you get less hookups. And even when you hooked them up, sometimes they would come off because you didn't get much of a bite with that particular hook. So the TMC 2488 was the perfect hook for me. It was like it was designed for this particular fly. So that's the one I selected, and it works so good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be tying a PMD extended body, and I'm going to be using Vivas 14-aught thread in yellow. And make sure that you have a good sized tag end. And just take this down to the bend of the hook. And then you want to capture the tag end of this tag end. I'm going to use this to split the tail. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to tie the extended body, and I'm just using standard monofilament. And this particular fly, because it's a larger fly, I'm going to be using 17-pound monofilament. I'm just going to cut it. When I first designed this fly, I would tie this on and it would actually roll on me, because monofilament, of course, is round and the shank of the hook is round. So I said, well, it keeps rolling on me. So what can I do to make it not roll? So I found that if I took a pair of hemostats, I could crimp it down. And I want to crimp it down so it's half the length of the straight part of the shank of the hook. So I'm just going to take this and just crimp it down. And now I'm going to be tying flat material to round material, and it stays. For me, for this particular fly, I'm going to be spinning my bobbin counterclockwise so I don't have to fight the thread. And I'm going to lash this in. Make sure that it's on the top of the shank of the hook. And this Vivas thread is so strong. You can put a lot of pressure on it without breaking the thread. And then just tie it off. So the monofilament has a memory, and a natural mayfly has a little curve upward, and it just worked out perfect for me. So at this point in time, I'm going to flip the fly. Don't have the shakes. There we go. And right now, this, of course, the monofilament is way too long. And when people say they're taking a size 16 PMD, what does that mean? Well, if you just go to the fly shop, you're just going to buy a size 16. But if you're tying your flies, it means something. So where do I cut my monofilament to make it a size 16. When you're fly fishing, the size is the most important thing. The second variable that's important is the shape and then the color. So I want to make sure that this 16 extended body is truly a 16. So what I'm going to be doing is, this is a TMC 101, and I want to make sure when I cut this, it's the length of the shank of this 101 hook. When you've done it enough, you don't even have to do this anymore, but initially you want to do this, because the size is critical. If the size is too large, they're not going to take the fly. I'm going to take just crazy glue or super glue or Zap-A-Gap, whatever you have, and I'm going to cover the monofilament with it. I'm going to take this tag end and put it underneath this monofilament. You have to do this. You have to spin your bobbin, or you're going to be fighting this thread the whole time, and it'll be almost impossible to do this. So what I'm going to do is cover this monofilament with the thread. So if I was tying a blueing olive, for instance, I'd just be using olive thread. So I'm just going to cover this monofilament with this thread. And this crazy glue or super glue or Zap-A-Gap or whatever you're using kind of keeps this thing from slipping off. And by spinning the bobbin, you know, I'm actually palmering this up and down, even though it looks like I'm pulling it towards me. I'm not. I'll be taking microfibrils, tailing material, and I'm going to take 2 of these off, because the actual mayfly has either 2 or 3 tails. It doesn't have 5 or 6. And I was trying to make this as close to the natural as possible. So I'm going to take 2 of these, make sure they line up. I'm just going to cut the tips off a little bit. And the reason I do that is sometimes when you leave them in a fly box too long, the microfibrils kind of curl, and then they just don't. I don't think it matters to the trout, but it kind of matters to me. So you're going to tie these in, and make sure that this is on top of the monofilament. And don't worry about the length of it, because I can make that adjustment later. Go all the way to the end of the monofilament, and then go back to the bend of the hook. Okay, and then the tail should be the length of the fly itself. So all you do is you take the tag end and you just pull it towards the eye of the hook until it's the right length. And that's it. Then I'm going to take this tag end, I'm going to put it through the middle of these tails and tie it in. Again, going back to the end of the extended body and go back. Tie it off. And then you can just kind of play with this a little bit. It's a very forgiving fly to tie. Cut off the tag ends. Got a little fuzz there. So the actual mayfly has a shiny or a sheen to its extended body, the actual abdomen. So I'm just going to use UV resin and coat it. The whole extended body. Hit it with the UV light. And that's the extended body. Let me get rid of that little fiber here that's bothering me. There we go. And then we're going to flip this fly. I'm going to be tying the parachute part now. Just going to wrap this end here. And I'm going to leave the thread right in front of that monofilament. I'm going to be tying my post in now. Which I'm using as, I use McFly-On for the post. I find that the actual post doesn't get flattened out over time. It keeps its form. Like so. And because you'll see that I'm going to be doubling this up. I'm not going to have to use the all of this material. So I'm just going to take this and cut maybe about an inch or so. And then I'm just going to get rid of some of this material. I don't need that much. Okay, I'm going to position this right at the end of the monofilament, lay it across the top. Again, I'm just going to, because that's what I do, I'm going to spin my bobbin, put a couple loose wraps over it, make sure it's positioned correctly. I can move it by lifting it. And once it's in place, I'm just going to put tight wraps on top of each other. I'm not spreading this out. I'm trying to keep it right on top of each other. Then I'm going to hold this up, and I'm just going to palmer up the post. So what I'm doing is I'm just advancing it with my finger, going upwards, and then back down. I'm going to take the thread and go back to the bend of the hook. And I'm just going to be using PMD dubbing. I'm going to dub this before I put in the hackle, because the hackle gets in the way when I'm trying to put the dubbing in. And again, you want to stretch out your dubbing, stretch it out like this, and so it doesn't clump up. So I just kind of stretch it out a little bit like this and extend it. And then just put it on your thread, and you don't need wax. It'll stay. And then I'm going to build the thorax now. If you want to tighten it up, you can spin it while you're dubbing. Now I'm going to be introducing tying in the dubbing, so I'm just using that. To prepare the hackle, all you have to do is strip off some of the fibers, because you're going to tie that onto the shank of the hook. And there's a concave and a convex side of this. You want to tie the concave side against the post. If you do that, then when you palmer it, the actual hackle is going to be, the concave side is facing upwards, which is the way I like it. I have friends that like to tie it where the concave side is pointing downward. And I'm thinking, and they say, well, it's like a rowboat that actually capsizes and it holds air. And I said, well, why do they make a rowboat that is supposed to be upright? And I said, you know what? It's actually a personal preference. It doesn't matter. But and they sometimes say it sinks the fly if it's concave side facing upwards. But I said, you know what? The only reason it's going to sink is because you're dragging it. So anyway, now I'm going to dub the thorax. again. And this particular way of doing your posts and how you're doing a parachute, this is, to me, is the easiest method of tying a parachute. I mean, I've tried other ways. I mean, I love to tie, but I don't like to tie unnecessarily, and I don't want it to take any longer or be any harder to tie than necessary. So if you take about 4 or 5 wraps, if it's a smaller fly, you're not going to do as many wraps because you're going to over hackle it. So I'm going to take 2 wraps over this tag end of the saddle, and 2 above and 1 below. So I'm above the shank itself. And if you don't do this, sometimes, the hackle will unravel off the post. So what I do is I just hold the post and I tug on the hackle just to get it real tight, and then I'll just cut that. So when I'm tying a parachute, I don't try to tie the end of the hackle to the front of the hook. It's just too hard. You always trap fibers and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this around the actual post, and I'm above the hook. And because this is 14-aught and the diameter is so small, I'm just going to tie this in a couple of times. That way I don't have to use glue. Glue always gets on everything and it just makes a mess. So I'm just going to tie this a few times. This will never come unraveled. I mean, you can catch so many fish with just one. And then just cut this. And then just neaten it up a little bit. And then just cut this to the right size, which is about a gape and a half of the hook. And that's it right there. My extended body, my Iwane-E-Dun extended body mayfly. And you can tie this in any size, in any pattern. You can do this in a blue wing olive. You can tie it in a size 10 green drake. You can tie this in a size 26 for a trico. The technique is the same. The monofilament changes in size, of course. The smaller the fly, the smaller the test of the monofilament. But this is dynamite. I mean, if there's a mayfly hatch, this for me anyway. This fly works tremendously.